Our next topic here is our viewer mailbag. The question here is, I think I may have accidentally downloaded some malware on my PC. If I do a system restore back to a point where I made the download, will that eliminate the potential malware? And I guess I'll start out by saying probably not, but I guess, John, we were talking about this a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I mean,
what's the first question?
It's going to depend greatly on the type of the malware, too.
Right.
And the long and short of it is probably best just to do a complete reimage of your PC, because you're not going to be 100% certain. But there's certain types of malware that affects your master boot record. Restoring to a restore point, system restore point, is not going to help with that, because that's only doing Windows-oriented types of files that have changed. Whereas your master boot record is right on your boot record of your disk, and it's injected before Windows even starts. So, those types of things.
Basically what it's going to do is it's going to go back and make sure all those registry changes that it thinks are supposed to be there are in, and make those registry changes and then let the system boot, right?
Right. So like TDSS is a real infamous master boot record type virus that is one of those ones that you're not going to be able to do a system restore to recover from. But there probably are some simpler or trivial pieces of malware that if you did do a system restore, you might be okay. You might also end up with things in your recycle bin and things that are actually still malware. But like I said, I would if I had some inkling as to what happened, I would be probably re-imaging my machine from scratch and reinstalling, including the master boot record. Right. When you rebuild your machine, make sure when you wipe your disk that you wipe the master boot record as well.
Well, and then you have to be paying a little bit of attention to the media that you're using along the way, or even media that's touched the computer in the meantime. So that's one of the things. I guess I would have taken just a little bit of a different approach first. Before re-imaging, I think what I would have done is to go to a bootable antivirus CD, so that you can go to a clean boot and then scan through the system and see if there are any signs of that malware. And there may be some potential for restoring it. I mean, this is a case where we're not really sure.
Right.
And so you want to try to get a little more confidence that doing the re-image is going to be meaningful.
I will say that antivirus is not 100% perfect.
Yeah, it's absolutely
true. And it usually isn't very good if the malware is very new, as in like it was written today or yesterday or something like that. You wait a couple of weeks, and there's a better chance that a signature has been added for whatever's on your system, so long as your system hasn't gone out and updated and gotten a new version.
Right.
But I think it's safe to, if you're not sure if you have malware at all, to go through the process that you went through. But if you know you had some malware, then it's game over, because you're never going to be sure. You might get one piece, but you're not going to get all the pieces that have also been downloaded as a follow-up activity by that piece of malware.
What I was going to say is basically that if you're not an expert, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between very sophisticated malware that infects the master boot record and does all these persistence tricks, or just very, very simple stuff. If you can't tell the difference, you're better off going for the whole shebang and wiping the whole machine just to be safe. And also, it's not as if the malware announces itself on the system.
Right.
So if you're going to try and pick a system restore point, you should be picking one where you know a good known date prior to the infection. If you don't have that, you can't make that decision. So I agree with John entirely.
Yeah, I think the premise here was that you kind of felt like you hit something that was suspicious, and you kind of know the event that occurred. But I think this is kind of a hypothetical scenario that we're talking about here. So, but we'd have to go back to the viewer to really know for certain. I guess
we're uber paranoid.
Yeah.
So, like when we get infected, especially I worry about crimeware. I don't want to take any chances that I'm going to log into my bank account and now somebody's because I've got some piece of malware on my machine that I'm not aware of that has captured my login ID and password for my bank and has now taken all my money out of my bank account. So, I'm extra paranoid about stuff, more so than maybe 10 years ago, where crimeware and financially motivated malware was not as relevant. A lot of it was more click fraud and these things that really didn't impact me as a user. They were just using my machine to further their whatever operation they're doing, and it didn't financially impact me necessarily. But nowadays, that's not the case.
Yeah,
there's a lot of malware out there.
Absolutely.
That's a good point, is that even if you were to go the route of cleaning up your machine, I would suggest to this user that there's still more steps you have to go through. I would assume that any credentials you entered on the machine during that period could just treat them as compromised, change them.
Yeah, good point. So make sure you go back and change any passwords that you've used, certainly in the meantime, if not anything else that's stored on the machine, because they're going to try to pilfer anything that was used on the machine. And if you have any password reuse across different accounts, you ought to be paying attention to that. And certainly you assume that the password for the machine itself or other user accounts are on there likely have been compromised as well.
And I realize how difficult that is to go back and change and come up with new passwords for everything, but in the long run, it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. A little pound of prevention, right? And I guess there are other signs that you might pick up on. I mean, as a consequence of a compromise, indications that your email account's getting used for things that you didn't intend it to be used for. I've seen a number of cases where Facebook accounts have been used to try to promulgate other malware to other users or sucker them into divulging information. So those types of scenarios, if you experience an event like that, you should consider that perhaps there has been a compromise on a computer. You need to pay attention to it.
One that would scream stop to me is that a lot of the banking malware will do what's called a web inject. They'll actually put code into your browser so that when you browse to a bank's website, if they're aware of that bank and they want to steal credentials for it, they'll throw in extra fields or extra pages into the logins script. So if you go to your bank and all of a sudden to log in, they've got an extra page that says, we'd like to have your social security number, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would at that point,
no more information than usual.
Yeah. I mean, once there are situations in which you may have to enter like a security code or something like that, but you would never have to enter your banking personal identification ever again. So, like I said, keep an eye out for those kinds of changes. If for some reason the logic flow has changed dramatically since the last time you logged into your bank, I'd be worried.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to throw in one more big tip-off that you're infected.
Just one?
Well, one that I see a lot is you'll start to notice all kinds of other applications installed and starting up on your machine, like weather apps and fake antivirus saying you've got some kind of infection on your machine, just click here to clean it up. But also all kinds of other, maybe not malicious applications, but applications that the bad actor that's running this botnet has installed on your machine because they get pay-per-install revenue off of them. So I've seen that a lot on malware-infected machines where there's a piece of malware that's on there, but now it's installing all of these other pseudo-legitimate applications on there because they're getting some kind of pay-per-install revenue from the owners of that software.
Yeah, I'd venture to say in cases like that, when you start seeing that type of activity taking place, they've already pilfered whatever they want from your machine. They basically have given up on it and they're passing it on to, they're willing to reveal the fact that your machine's infected. So it is certainly an indicator to pay attention to. Good point. And I guess last, but not least, perhaps, we've talked a lot about devices that we don't really think of as computers. There are also a lot of devices we don't really think of as media devices as well. So things like you plug in your phone to charge it, it is a media device. It may not actually get infected itself, but may carry the infection to other computers, or if you restore your computer and then plug it back in, it could reinfect the computer. So things to pay attention to, that is if the symptoms come back, obviously, that's a possibility, but you want to try to avoid that sort of scenario.
If your computer can treat it as a thumb drive and you're infected, the infection will treat it as a thumb drive.
Exactly.
So you'll be moving it just the same as if you were going around with a thumb drive.
And it'll be a hidden file or something buried in the master boot record associated with that device as well. Is that correct?
Well, it's the auto run on the thumb drive usually.
Right. Okay.